Hello, good morning. You're muted again. You're muted. I know.
I'm so used to it coming off automatically, these newfangled technology.
I know.
Well, good morning and welcome to the latest episode of the Project Failure Files, where Sharon consistently forgets to unmic her mute. Also, this series is for anyone who manages projects for a living. If you've been a project, program, product, group manager, operations manager, we should come up with more things to say about that.
I know. We should make that like a 5-minute thing of going through various titles.
Or maybe you've owned your own business like I do, and you've worn every single hat there is. Either way, this weekly series is definitely for you. I am Sharon Weaver, founder, CEO of Smarter Consulting.
And I am Christian Buckley, the founder of Collab Talk. And welcome to another episode of our series where Sharon and I, we break down and go off script often, but explore project management topics from the perspective of what not to do as you manage projects. In each episode of the Project Failure Files, we'll talk about the common pitfalls, sharing personal stories and experiences, and explore strategies and best practices to help you to be successful.
And in this episode, we are talking about the importance of having a champion or sponsor, because not having an executive sponsor, it can impact the start of a project. It can definitely impact the budget. Sometimes whether the key stakeholders will give you the time of day, so many other issues.
This really is one of those project management 101 topics. Having someone in management or from your senior leadership team behind your project, or whatever the initiative is, it can make all the difference in the world.
Yeah. I mean, another way to think about this, especially from like a consulting perspective, is someone in IT hires you to deploy some new technology, but nobody in leadership knows what's going on. Nobody's aware about the project. Maybe everything kind of gets going, you get it started, and then some people are going to realize that it's being done, but there's no authority behind it.
I know that's probably never happened to you, Sharon.
No, never.
That's where things begin to fall apart. So this should be a fun conversation as always. And with every episode, please feel free to comment throughout the episode and share your experiences and any great examples or feedback that we may have missed.
All right, let's get started with some definitions. And maybe we start with the definition of sponsor versus champion versus stakeholder, just so that people kind of know who's who and what's what.
Yeah, think of that project champion. And I guess this is confusing because we are going to talk about in the future, actually, we've already talked about it. We've talked about championing something. So you have anybody in the organization.
Loop, Christian. It's just a loop.
I know it is that we're on here. But the difference between those things. So there's championing the verb versus a champion. But so the project sponsor or champion for this usually is that senior leader, a key stakeholder who is really the advocate, maybe the instigator of the project. So it's somebody who said from a business unit that says, we need to have this technology to go do X, whatever that is for the business, to achieve these business objectives. And so they're the one that provides that strategic direction, the ties to the business alignment, ensuring that all of the necessary resources are allocated. Maybe even that business unit is funding this project in the headcount, the hiring of additional people, paying for the licenses for this new product, whatever that thing is.
Yes. I mean, sometimes the champion and the sponsor are the same person or the same group. But typically, I mean, at the end of the day, the sponsor is almost always somebody who has something to do with the funding. I know we don't like to talk about this a lot sometimes just because it's been kind of a weird thing, but I always see, the sponsor has the checkbook, right? They're the ones at the end of the day who have a big, heavy influence on the budget side. Whereas the champion who may be the sponsor, but your champion is the person who's rah-rahing and really excited, like you said, about whatever it is that you're bringing in, whatever you're implementing, whatever you're changing. Oftentimes champions may have used this product in the past and they want to see it in the current organization, or maybe they've, gotten to be part of a demo or a pilot, and now they're coming in and they're saying, hey, I want the whole group to get it. But like you said, they're definitely more kind of hands-on and intertwined, where while a sponsor, once again, may sometimes be a champion and they may be excited about it, they definitely have more leverage in terms of, budget and influence and resources and things like that.
Yeah, I think that the key differentiator here of having that sponsor at that top level is that there is somebody who is able to, as like signature capability to actually say yes or no on the budget for this effort. If you don't have that, like I've had that different organizations where I was like the director of program management, where all of the projects, they didn't happen unless I authorized it. It could have been the president of the company. It could have been a VP. It could have been a GM, some of the organization who is the chief stakeholder, might be the budget, the project sponsor of that. But as the champion or the sponsor of all projects and the life of that project, they came through me. So it might be even multiple people. But at the end of the day, it's most of the companies I've worked for, where it's a senior leader, it's an executive, a VP, the CEO that says, this is an official project, like go. You are funded, it's approved, the board has said yes, go. So it could be a board member, an executive who has that signing authority to go and do. And I think I think we're going to go back and forth between champion and sponsor. Maybe we just refer to it for this, so it's not confusing with champions as the verb of championing something as just the sponsor, if that makes more sense.
Well, I think it does make sense, because at the end of the day, a champion without a sponsor is just an instigator. So I think it's while a champion is important and needed, I think the sponsor is required. And so I think, at the end of the day, when we have this conversation, we want to understand what's important about them and what matters and what are the consequences of not having one. I would say it's more important to have a sponsor than it is to have a champion anyways. So
completely agree. And there are plenty of projects that have that were started. We use some examples of going and, an engineer says, I found this problem. I'm going to go and start this side project to go and fix this. It's like, yeah, but you have stakeholders and there's no executive authority over this thing. So when you start to get into, it's fine if you're an individual contributor and you're doing something where the scope of it is in your activities, but as you're impacting any other aspect of the business, and I would argue even as an individual contributor, you spending time on a project that's not authorized by somewhere in the chain means that you're less of a resource for everything else. So
say it louder.
Anything that you do impacts your availability on other projects that are official. But thinking of the sponsors, like the role of this, of why this is important, to think of it first and foremost, and I said we nailed it around financial, but it's the ensuring that every project has the necessary financial, technical, and human resources, the people, to succeed. It's kind of the three keys to project management is the time, the budget, and the people to be successful. But beyond that, they're also then an advocate for the project. And so they help. This is one of the things I hate the most is, but they help you navigate those organizational politics.
Yeah. How many times have we done this where you do something in your spare time that somebody wants you to help with that hasn't actually been approved as a project, but now you find you're spending all your time doing it, even though it's not technically a project. And then the next thing you know, you're getting yelled at because you're not focused on the things that the business wants you to focus on. You're like, but so-and-so told me to do this. And they're like, but it doesn't have a sponsor.
Yeah. We've talked about in past episodes around having business alignment, having alignment with your corporate strategic goals. Like, I love that when those organizations have that hierarchy of, you know, that the CEO comes out and says, this next year, 2025, we're going to do these 3 big things. And everything as it goes down the organization should know, like my business unit, we know here's the 10 things that we're going to do this year that will deliver on those 3 initiatives. And then me as an individual contributor can look and say, for my division, knowing there's already that business continuity there, that I'm going to be working on tasks around these 4 of the 10 for my business unit that roll up to the initiatives. So in some ways, you should know on a daily basis the tasks you're working on, how it's adhering to and delivering on those corporate goals. Well, part of having that sponsor is to ensure that alignment is there with projects. So they're helping navigate the political landscape. They're providing that strategic guidance and alignment to make sure that it fits in with the overall and the changing business strategy.
Yeah. And if you have a manager ever that says to you, go work on this thing, and you say, how does that fit in with our business goals, boss? And the boss says, it's okay. We don't really need to align with business goals. I just want to do this because it's going to make this person over here happy. You probably should be challenging some assumptions and looking at things, because to your point, if you don't have a sponsor that's carrying that project along, you personally might be putting your job on the line if you are not accounted for somewhere where that sponsor has the resource management efforts going.
I'm just an advocate for then reminding your manager, if it's a web meeting, a chat, be like, this is being recorded. Could you please restate that? Or if it's a in-person meeting, walk in with a GoPro strapped to your chest. Like, I'm documenting everything here. So you're asking me to do something that's outside of the scope. Yeah, I mean, the other side of this too is acting as a communication bridge. And I'm sure this has never happened to you, Sharon, where someone will come and be very demanding and be like, let's go talk to the VP and let's see. And then they'd be like, no, I see that it's a lower priority than maybe what you're working on right now. Yeah. So if there's change happens all the time, and sometimes let's go over to the VP and let's talk about, I think this is urgent and it should be reprioritized to the top of the list. And let's have that conversation. That should be part of your process. But having that sponsor, I mean, again, can be that de facto, that way to get out of being the bad guy of sometimes saying no, or not right now, I can't go and address this need. You can rely on, like, because of this priority, because of this objective, our timeline, and let's go talk to the project sponsor of whether this can be paused while we deal with this.
Coming up in my career, I had that happen a lot. And I do, I coach a lot of people, and I actually just had this conversation this last week with somebody that I, was kind of giving some advice to. And that's exactly what happens, is that you have different people that have different priorities. And early on, what I would do is if somebody emailed me, hey, I need this right away, or I need this tomorrow, or whatever, I would be like, no problem. I'm just going to reply and copy in whoever the sponsor is who's responsible for making those decisions. And I just like them to maybe reprioritize the things I have on my plate. And so, once a week I would send that to my manager with a list of things. And if anybody kind of came along the way and sent me something, I'd be like, here's the things that have come in. Can you just make sure I'm on the right track, and can you prioritize these for me? And what's really interesting is, having that sponsor, whether it's personally or whether it's at the project level, and I am going to say this out loud, personally or at the project level, making sure that sponsor is in alignment with your own priorities really makes a big difference. And like you said, having that in writing, especially as you're kind of coming up at the ranks, kind of creates that communication bridge to avoid all those political pitfalls, make sure you're working on the right thing. And it kind of does the extra little bonus wink of being very visible to the right people at the right place.
That is key. I think it's the whole idea of maintaining momentum as you're going on, and that ongoing enthusiasm. That is so critical, especially up front. If your formal process, like you've got a formal project kickoff as part of that, having a sponsor participate in that to call out the stakeholders, especially think of it almost like attorneys going into court, preparing for court. If you're going to have witnesses who will be hostile, if you're going to have, the style of the opposing attorneys, for example, and being prepared for that by calling that out up front, like not hiding the fact, like, look here, we're going to have difficulties in this areas. Certain decisions have to be made. Certain things that we're going to have to overcome in this project. Having the sponsor call those things out. I've even, when I've gotten into a project where I feel like there's a stakeholder that's not being responsive, I will go to my sponsor and say, I need you to call this person and tell them to get their act together. And so there's different tactful ways of doing that, not saying, hey, the project manager, Christian, just asked me to reach out to you. Like, no, wrong way to do it. That tends to get a flowery response to the VP and an angry response to the PM who brought it, who was then seen as tattletelling on that. So I would know your sponsor to know their level of tact, but I would often I would often write the email. I said, could you please send this as you? And they would tweak it a little bit, but I would say, hey, in the project status that I received from this team, I see it outstanding that you've not yet responded. Did you realize this is impacting the timeline? This is one of my major priorities. So there's a way of doing that to get them revved in. Again, it raised the level of enthusiasm around the project.
And I've always I've done this in the past, and now that I'm in a leadership position, I do this way too. But I will CC the sponsor, the executive, whoever the influencer is, on the message. I would even write it myself and just, ensure with them ahead of time that they understand the situation. Be like, hey, I'm struggling with this. Do you mind if I just put you on this for visibility? And I do that now for my people. If they're, struggling with an issue or whatever, they're like, hey, this issue has come up and we're dealing with this. And I'm like, you know what? Go ahead and just CC me so they know I'm watching. And also, so if something comes up that they don't feel comfortable responding to, I'm already an active participant in the conversation, and it makes it really easy.
Here's some practical guidance for PMs out there listening, and that this is, I would actually make this point part of your initial discussions with that sponsor. Say, hey, what are the right ways, if I need your help in these certain scenarios, how can I go and leverage you? Because as a people manager, I would always say, like, when you are looking for me to do something specific, don't just say, hey, reach out to this person. Say, I need you to call this person. I need you to email this person and say this. I will then fine tune the language so it sounds like me and do exactly that. But it's, I always would say, I find myself saying, and maybe Sharon, you do the same thing. It's like, tell me specifically what you need me to do.
Yes. What do you need me to do to help you with this, to solve this problem? And I think you're 100% right. I think knowing your stakeholders and knowing your sponsors and knowing your champions is really important, and understanding, because you're absolutely right. There are some sponsors who will literally be like, so-and-so told me to say this to you, because they don't understand the situation. And then there are other ones that are a lot more politically savvy, that understand, okay, this is how this needs to be handled. And so I think it is good to have that relationship with them so that you know what you can ask for, what you should ask for, and how you need to help them to help you.
Right. Yeah. It's funny, to understand the style and the politics and kind of all those different things, but you should, for all your stakeholders, you should understand that. Again, I look at the role of management, not just project management, but people management as well, of leadership, is that the job number one is unblocking people. That's it. That's the most important thing.
Yep.
If you hire the right people, if they understand the roles and responsibilities, if they know the project and the scope, kind of all those things, all those things, the answer is like, yes, it's all in place. You've done well there. Then it would be like, when you come to me, like, I'm not interested in knowing just, generic, what's the state of each project you're working on. I can read a status report. I can read, a portfolio view of the projects. What do you need me to do? What are the risks? Let's talk about that. what are the next steps, and what are the blockers that you need me to get involved so that you can get your job done. And that should be a lot of the way that you approach this. Hopefully you have that relationship with the sponsors of the project, and talk about that, the right approach for that.
So what are some of the major issues of maybe having a project that doesn't have a champion or a sponsor?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, is it a project? Is it really a project?
Do you get any respect at all?
Well, but it's I mean, the problems are look, there are a lot of, again, I'll go back, having worked in IT most of my career, there are plenty of technical projects would fall in the scope of what IT was trying to do that didn't have, there wasn't foreknowledge by an executive as an official sponsor. Now, we had anything within that, like our CIO or CTO owned all of IT, owned all of engineering. So it all rolled up in their purview. So we had that, and different experiences. Some were good at having their people's back, and others not so good at that. But to when you get into start to have political issues, you're getting pushback from different groups. Not having that sponsorship impacts that. Even bigger than the political issues, though, is that getting the resources, getting the budget, getting the people to go and do the thing. And then if it's depending on the project, if you have to purchase servers, hardware for things, whatever that is, again, it comes down to budget, but getting those approvals, incredibly difficult if you don't have that signing authority.
Yeah, I tell the story all the time, but I actually had an opportunity where I came in and helped somebody who had come to me and basically said, okay, I'm trying to procure this piece of software for my division. And we've been they had gone to the steering committee for 7 years, 7 annual steering committees for budget initiatives saying, we need this software to change from this software to software, right? That was the only ask. We want to go from this software to this software, but this software was half the price of the software they wanted to switch to. And so every year they made their case, they went in, and every year they got denied. And they came to me and they said, okay, we know that you are really good at, getting people to make these decisions. And so we'd like to have you help us. And ultimately, we put together a case that basically showed that switching the software was going to return it. It was going to provide an immediate ROI to the sponsor that would be involved, that would end up taking this on. So this is another thing people don't think about is, those sponsors are all sitting in these meetings every year and they're deciding what they're going to do and what they're not going to do. And by coming into this meeting and basically presenting the need and saying, hey, this decision will immediately give you an ROI. The sponsor looked at me and he looked at all my stuff and he said, so you're telling me that whenever we start this project, whenever we kick this off, we're going to immediately start making more money and immediately saving money, even though on the surface it doesn't look that way. When I gave him the actual facts in the way that I put it, I was like, yeah, you're immediately going to start making money. He goes, well, then it'd be stupid for me to not sign it. He signed it. He was a fantastic champion of the entire project. It was a year-long project, handed it back. And it's just so, so, so important to have that sponsor because they're going to be literally oftentimes make or break it to securing the resources that you need to make that project successful.
Well, another aspect too is that when you're at the lower level as a PM, you're down in the weeds of executing on these projects. You're not going to have the visibility, that higher level of the overall strategy of the company. Maybe there's a change of direction that's coming. Maybe there's alignment across projects, some that are public, some that are not. They might be initiatives around new intellectual property that's been developed that you're not aware of, you're not privy to. And so having that, this is a critical factor too. It's not just helping grease the skids, move the project along of what's defined, but also making sure that there is that strategic alignment from what you can't see.
Yeah.
And providing that guidance. And they can't always talk about why, but and again, this is where you have an engaged sponsor who understands, like, I am providing this feedback. I've actually had an executive tell me, it's like, I can't tell you why, but we're going to make the decision on this software here. And I was able to put 2 and 2 together, like, okay, there's going to be a major shift towards this other solution, which is why they're going this product, which is lesser than the one we were looking at, but it's owned by the company for this other area. Anyway, so sometimes you're able to kind of divine out like what's happening behind the scenes, but having that alignment, I mean, helps further down the road with the rest of your project discussions. If the sponsor is not just checked out rubber stamping stuff, which is not helpful. I've also had that experience where they rubber stamp stuff and then came back later when they realized, oh, we should have halted this or gone a different direction. And then they throw the project team under the bus. I've been there as well. And that's where, again,
that's a different topic.
Documentation is always great.
Yeah. In fact, so one of the things is if you don't have a sponsor, projects tend to just not do well, right? Like in general. I mean, sometimes you can kind of sneak little things in, but especially bigger things. I worked in an organization, and I felt really bad about this one because I worked in an organization and we had a champion without a sponsor, right? And I said a champion without a sponsor is an instigator. And he came in and he was fantastic. And honestly, he was spreading the love of Tableau, and this was a Power BI shop. And he was spreading the love of Tableau. And I really like both of the tools. Tableau is a great tool. I have nothing against it. And he came to me, hey, can you help me with this? He was a great champion for Tableau in the organization. He brought it in. He actually got some people using it, but he didn't wrap a formal project around it, and it didn't tie into a specific business objective at the time. And he worked real hard at the grassroots level to really get people interested in this. And he really was fighting for it, trying to get a sponsor to really kind of catch on and pick him up. And what ended up happening is a lot of people started using it, but without the long-term support of a sponsor, there was no, funding for the larger tool set. And so a lot of people were using the free tool, but it never really grew into that. What ended up happening is it went the other direction. They spent a lot of money in Power BI visualizations and things like that. And so it came back and said, well, it kind of got squashed out over time, and it stayed in some areas, but it never really made it at the enterprise level. And I always kind of felt bad because I think some of the things he was trying to do were really, really good, but because there was just a lack of formal project and formal sponsor, all the resources went the Power BI direction instead of the Tableau direction. And so, I mean, this shows you what happens simply by not having somebody kind of behind you, supporting you.
It's with that scenario, I mean, this is kind of a side topic, but I think it's an important one, is like, what can you do when you realize, hey, we've got a sponsor, an instigator, but not an actual executive sponsor. And this goes back to, how mature your organization is at bringing new projects, new initiatives and things together. Like if you have a change management body, a governance board that's reviewing a formal PMO, and you should bring up, and the executive sponsors of that initiative, that effort, should then be made aware of shadow IT projects as you become aware of them, of these other unsponsored initiatives. So you either need to nip it in the bud, shut it down early, or, hey, we need full sponsorship of this to make it a full-fledged thing. Because I'm not making a judgment call or right or wrong of having those kinds of projects. Yeah. Some things start that way. Some initiatives start from the ground up.
A lot of great initiatives start that way.
Right.
Yeah. No. In fact, I think, you're absolutely right. And I don't know if we have this as a topic or not, but shadow IT is definitely a fantastic topic about the idea of
very much on the list.
Yeah. It's that idea of, things are bubbling around you, and how do you keep track of, identify, and prioritize shadow IT along with, kind of the high level sanctioned IT projects.
I always say that it's shadow IT is not like something that you should go and necessarily just slap people's hands and stop doing that. It's more of a reflective. Why did somebody feel like they have to go around and do something that's unauthorized? Their needs are not being met somewhere, or it's a retraining issue. They're not aware of what we already have. Like my response to you're in that scenario, that instigator pushing Tableau. Is that, maybe he was more familiar with it because of past companies and projects and not aware of what's happening on the other side of the business and investments that have already been made, and just needs to be brought into the fold and trained on, hey, this decision has already been made. Or maybe a decision hasn't been made and it needs to be surfaced in the right arena to get that proper support.
Yeah, communicated better.
Yep. Well, I guess this gets into it is like this, thinking about strategies for engaging with and leveraging sponsors effectively. Like, what's your approach? What are the key pieces there to get their attention, to get them involved?
Yeah, and so like that exact example, he had come to me and said, "Hey, I'm trying to do this, and I'm just not getting any traction." And this is exactly the advice that I gave to him. Is I was like, well, you need to understand what the business objectives and business initiatives are for the year, 1, 2, 3, 5-year goals, depending on how mature the company is. And you need to understand who is responsible for each of those things. And I know, Christian, this is asking people to know things about their companies. And when you're younger and you're a junior,
I know.
You're a junior level, like all you care about is like, is there a coffee machine, or do they have food at work? There's things you care about that are more important when you're younger and you're kind of getting going. But as you kind of progress in your career, I think it's really important to understand what your company is doing at an initiative level, at a business plan level. Who are those sponsors that are participating in that? And once you know that, I think the really great thing is you can build relationships with those people, which is good for you in your own career anyways. But it also helps you then to go to them and say, there's a project that I really think is valuable, and I'd really like to share that information with you. Or I know that this is one of the things that's on the list, and I'd really like to maybe take your temperature on how you're feeling about this. Because the more you know personally, if you're a project manager, if you're a program manager, if you're a portfolio manager, the more you personally know about how those sponsors feel about some of these different things, the more you're going to know whether or not, like, do I need a really loud champion on this to make a case? Or is this something that's even worth going down this path to get our sponsor really on board with supporting this initiative?
Yeah. And having initially somebody on board, like, hey, yeah, I've signed on to be the sponsor, and maybe you have it as policy. And I've worked with places where they have this policy that there has to be a sponsor, may not be the right sponsor, but there's an executive that is over different areas, or they take a ticket and whoever's next gets the next initiative, whatever it is. But they're not as enthusiastic about that. But the more that you can do, and this goes back to, what can you do? How can you leverage them? How you get them more engaged? Communicating, talk about the value of the project, their role in it. And then specifically, this goes back to what we talked about, key decision making. Here's my specific ask. This is what I need you to look at. This stuff is all running well. This is where we are. Is this still in alignment? I've heard about this other initiative. Like, do you think there's an impact, or we're having this difficulty getting involvement from these teams? Like, here are things that you can go and do. So if you directly involve them in very specific aspects of that and keep them informed and engaged, the more likely then they will get more engaged.
Well, yeah, they'll know more about what's going on. They'll understand more about the criticality or the importance of the problem that you're trying to solve. But here's the other kicker, back to this bonus item, is that they will see a project champion, a project manager, a program manager who cares about the viability of that project. And that might be like, oh, there's somebody here who's actually going to make sure this happens. maybe this time that should make the cut. And I do think that's really important because, they've got a gigantic list of competing initiatives that they have to decide what they're going to support and what they're going to back and what they're going to put resources towards. And they're the people who are making those decisions. If you're interacting with them and you're giving them visibility to the value of solving this problem and they understand it better, they're far more likely to not just support it, but also be involved because it's going to make them feel good about that.
I'll have to say that there are, obviously there are people who are really good at the sales side of communication. And I've had PMs work for me, some that were really good at the presentation layer and going and selling people on that and the passion around that. And sometimes I've taken, so this is a way to describe it, like more difficult projects. I was like hairier, scarier. Anyway, other problematic projects where I have assigned sales centric, consulting centric PMs that were able to go. And part of my directive to them was, you need to get this organization or these executives on board.
Yeah.
Like, you need to spend more time with these stakeholders that are causing problems or not involved. They seem disengaged. We need to have them involved. And so that is something where it's like doing a marketing campaign. You need to constantly review and adjust the marketing mix based on the level of involvement around that. I'd even advise part of your portfolio review when you're talking about project status going in, and part of it is sponsor, stakeholder, end user engagement around that, and say, what are your plans? What are you doing? What else can we be doing to make sure this project stays on track and people understand the seriousness of the questions that are outstanding, that are out there. And that's maintaining that strong relationship with your sponsor is a huge part of that. And so we've talked about all these pieces just to kind of summarize some of these, but having regular and transparent communication. So you've got your project, your governance body, your change management team, whatever, where you're going through and you're reviewing all the projects on a regular basis. That's great. How often are you meeting one-on-one with the stakeholders, with your sponsor, and discussing those projects which they have sponsorship authority over? And so that is something where it gets easier if you're in IT, your sponsor is the head of IT for all this, that you're having those conversations. Most of the time where I've had that experience, it's been a dozen different executives that I would try to meet with, maybe monthly, sometimes as infrequently as quarterly, but that there's a regular check-in of those projects, of their role, of the status of the project, the high level, talking about alignment, talking about communication, and then having any specific asks of, here, I need you to go and do this. It would be great if you could speak with these stakeholders around these topics. So having, say, actionable insights, here are my asks, here are the requests, here's where we need your input, making that very clear. And then as part of that, they don't just like being bothered by the questions and the problems, but to also share with them, hey, here are our wins. This is where we're ahead of schedule here. We're under budget here. We had these huge successes. So you're also showing progress that has been done.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm going to add here, because this is the project failure files. So I'm going to add, if you really want to stay stuck in your career and you want to have no project visibility or no professional visibility, like this idea that a lot of people believe that corporate is top down, right? These people make decisions and then they tell this person what to do. And then the manager tells this person what to do. And this person does the job, and that's it. Like, it's all top down. And I'm going to tell you now, the people who go in and understand that we're all on the same team, and you go in and build those relationships professionally, they're going to see that, and you're going to develop relationships that are going to help you in your professional career. At a project level, if you don't want your project to hover at the bottom of the resource pool, like literally down there on the very last line of the initiative sheet, where they're like, well, if there's money left over, we'll give it to this project. If you'd actually like your project to be viewed as something that's like in the mix and actively working, create those relationships. And like Christian just said, have the communication channel, provide them feedback. Don't just go to them when you have problems. Like, really be like, hey, this is what's going on, and I want to make sure you're involved.
And you have them more involved, you're going to get faster resolution of problems. You're going to have stronger stakeholder engagement. When you suddenly like, hey, we need more budget for this. This is why. If they're more involved, they're going to be knowing, they'll have more trust in you because of that visibility as well, to know that, all right, Sharon's serious about this. She's saying, hey, we're $10K below budget, what we need for this. This is why. All right, this will help us deliver on time. And here's the value proposition. That additional $10K gives us this. We hit on time, and we then don't get penalized by late fees, by whatever it is. So thinking about, round this out, Sharon, thinking about practical tips for strengthening the role of the sponsor. Like, my first and foremost, I always say, is you have a plan. You've got your plan. You've got all of that as part of your plan. You have here's the business benefits. So that should be part of what's presented to that sponsor to get them on board. What are your other key takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, it's that whole making sure they know what's going on, making sure they feel involved. And like I just mentioned, don't look at it as a top down. This is a team sport, a team event where everybody needs to know what's going on, understand what's happening on the project. And, teams that work together, play together, win together, lose together, I think, at the end of the day, really have more success overall, and they bounce back too. So if maybe this project isn't completely successful, or maybe it has to go into a phase 2 or a phase 3, then I think you're building a relationship for that sponsor, that champion, for life, not just for that one project. And my guess is you're probably going to do more projects with them down the road. And so you're kind of setting things up so that long-term you're strengthening that relationship with that sponsor overall.
And it might be, and I've had this where there are some executives that then request, like, hey, we want Christian to come work on this project because great experience with them on this last project. So getting work now as a consultant. I mean, a lot of what I get is without any formal marketing, it's through referrals. It's based on those relationships. And so I have again and again that I work with some clients because they're happy with the end result. It's the same in a PM relationship. Offer, of course, having metrics, having reporting, all those pieces is critical there. Others, you might need to stroke the ego a bit more for the sponsor, show the appreciation for that. The point is, know the sponsors, know their personality, know, are they driven more on metric? Are they driven more on the preciseness of the communication? Are they more of the ego stroking kind? They like to hear the praise that they're, thanks to them, like all the help there. Like, hey, whatever is in your tool you need to pull out of your tool belt to get your project to stay on time, on budget with the people that you need. Hey, do it. Like, go take those steps within legal boundaries, folks. I'm not saying go prostitute yourself. I know. Exactly.
Ethical, moral boundaries.
That's what I was like. A little shoulder massage is okay, but that's as far as I go. Yeah. No.
Not okay.
Yeah, it's not a big thing. I know. Hopefully it's not a thing. So, yeah. But so again, just to kind of recap, I mean, the role of sponsors of that top level champion, and securing resources, navigating the politics, providing that strategic direction is so critical for project success. And so the thing about like a call to action for anybody watching the episode, get to know your project sponsors. If you're on projects that it's unclear, you clearly do not have a sponsor, then figure out, work with your manager, work with the project owner, the stakeholders, to define who that sponsor should be, and intentionally go and get a sponsor for that project. You can do it midway through the execution of a project, but build that into your methodology so that you can establish that as part of your process and make sure that you have those strong relationships throughout the project lifecycle.
Yeah. I definitely have a sponsor, definitely build relationships with them, and always remember that, that visibility is super helpful to your long-term career in that organization and other organizations.
Yep. And thank you everybody for watching this episode. Again, if you want to reach out to us, you can connect with us on X and LinkedIn and the Book of Faces and wherever. We're all over the place. We're on everything. I'm on Mastodon and Blue Sky. It's not a lot of activity.
I don't even know what all the social media things are anymore. I just don't even know.
Doesn't matter. I mean, most of the activity is X and LinkedIn. But you can find us there out on X, of course. If you are like this episode, if you're new to the show, you can go out and search on hashtag project failure files. You'll find a bunch of things that are out there. I've got my blog. We've got the YouTube channel with every episode. And then we also have this community over on this group out on Facebook that is wide open. So you can join that there. Of course, we're creating other things later in the year, so there's going to be multiple community options. I think once we make the switch over to the private community, then there'll just be a placeholder redirect on this. So find us on Facebook. It'll redirect you once that site is live. Yep. And otherwise, we're everywhere.
Yeah, we're everywhere all the time.
Yeah, all the time. So, well, thanks all for watching, and we'll see you next week. We'll be back next Monday at 9 a.m. for every Monday, 9 a.m. Pacific.
Forever and ever.
For the rest of our lives. We are chained to the desks. We're doing these, but thanks for watching.
Bye. Bye.
I really want to know, Sharon. Really? While I'm waiting for my train.
Really?
Bye.